Hello everyone, Ember Power here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at some Darkrai and Samurott V-Star deck lists from post-rotation Scarlet and Violet format. So Darkrai V-Star and Samurott, just to give some context for those who aren't too familiar, have had a bit of a ropey time in the TCG to say the least. I think a lot of people predicted these cards would be at least a bit decent, especially Darkrai V-Star, considering it has an amazing V-Star power and a very strong attack in the form of Dark Pulse. It does 30 damage and then 30 more for each Dark Energy attached to all of your Pokemon. And it does seem like a pretty good attack at first, but unfortunately the harsh reality of Darkrai V-Star is you need way too many energy to realistically pull the strategy off, because Darkrai V-Star really wants to be in a format where it can one-hit kill the opposition, but unfortunately as Pokemon get bulkier and bulkier, this obviously becomes a lot more difficult, and Samurott V-Star is in a similar position, like it wants to try and want to kill Pokemon with its first attack. It does have a V-Star power which can help with it, but yeah, both of these cards have struggled quite a bit in terms of trying to achieve the one-hit KO status. However, post-rotation does offer a bit of a brighter future because it comes with the introduction of single-prize Pokemon, or a lot more evolving Pokemon, I should say, which have lower HP, as well as some more EX Pokemon that have between 240 and 280 HP, so typically a lot lower than the average V-Star, which is good. And there's also the inclusion of Gardevoir EX, which looks to be one of the best decks post-rotation, probably top 4, top 3, and Darkrai V-Star will naturally be hitting weakness. It also has decent weakness itself, being weak to grass, and the only other grass type I can really think about in Standard is probably going to be Spidops, which might not even be better than Tier 2, Tier 1.5 at the best, so yeah, Darkrai's in a pretty solid spot post-rotation. So some new translations just to quickly go over. We have Revroom and Klefki. Revroom says you must discard energy from your hand in order to use ability. Once in your turn, you can drop to 6. Just a really strong ability because it has synergy with the Galarian Moltres V, as well as synergy with Dark Patch. So that's why people like Revroom a lot. I know some people think this ability is terrible compared to stuff like Barrel. I personally don't get that argument because Rumbling Engine is just so good. The fact that you can just discard an energy from your hand. I mean, think about all those games where you've had an extra energy in your hand with the Darkrai deck. Just being able to use Rumbling Engine seems really good. We also have the Klefki with the ability Mischievous Lock. It says as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, basic Pokemon in play have no abilities. So in Hisuian Samurott V-Star decks, you basically don't have many basic Pokemon with abilities, except for maybe Galarian Moltres V or the baby Galarian Moltres. So just being able to shove a Klefki in the active is pretty decent, just to try and buy ourselves more time against Lost Zone, and essentially force them to use an Escape Rope. Just going into this first list, very straightforward, streamlined build of Darkrai. I think I've reviewed a similar list to this one before in the past. It's playing a 3-3 line of Darkrai, which is really solid. 2 Galarian Moltres V, 1 baby Galarian Moltres, really good at prize trading into 1 prize matchups, 1 Ranger and Greninja, and then the Ball Search is probably what you'd expect, 4 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball, and then we also have stuff like 4 Cross Switcher, because we don't really want to make room for high counter bosses orders in Serena, so I suppose you could say this deck does have above average gusting capabilities, and thus you're probably trying to make use of the fact that Darkrai V-Star is probably going to be going after stuff like Luminion and stuff like Miraidon, lower HP Pokemon that stink on the bench, because, if your opponent puts, say, Magenzone EX in the active, it's going to be really hard for you to want to KO. But if they start benching loads of Miraidons, then, they essentially give them the same price cards, so you probably want to be gusting and knocking those Pokemon out. But yeah, pretty solid list overall. I do like this one. It's very consistent. Stuff like Palpad I always approve of because I think it's a great card. Escape Rope's really nice. You don't really need switches in the deck, but Escape Rope will give you an extra gusting option theoretically, as well as just being able to switch out the active if you start with something like a Galarian Moltres. So yeah, pretty solid list overall. This next one is going to be a pretty similar build to the last. We've got the same Galarian Moltres, well, the same Darkrai V-Star line, I should say, 3-3. Then we also have 3 Galarian Moltres V, no baby Moltres, which is interesting, and then 2-2 line of Revroom. I think this deck should probably make room for at least 1 baby Moltres. I know it's a terrible start, especially since we lose Scoop Up Net, but I think you kind of need baby Moltres just to prize trade more effectively and stuff like Gardevoir, so yeah, I would definitely consider adding 1 baby Galarian Moltres. But really, all that aside, I'd say his list is pretty strong. Obviously, you have to use Ultra Ball to find your evolution Pokemon, because there's no Great Ball in the deck, but yeah, I kind of like this deck. It's interesting that it's more of a focus on Galarian Moltres V as opposed to the baby Moltres, but yeah, pretty interesting list overall. This next one is going to go back to a 3-2 Darkrai line, which is, well, 3-3 line, I should say. So we are back to playing, consistency, I guess. But we are playing 2 Baby Glaring Moltres, so that's something I automatically approve of. Also playing the Barrel over the Rev Room. I'm not sure if this was a deliberate choice or if this was because, they couldn't get a hold of Rev Room or, they prefer Barrel. It could be either one, to be honest. I don't think Barrel is necessarily miles worse than the Rev Room, but I certainly would say Rev Room was better in a deck with Dark Patch, so it's just my 2 cents. You also have Radiant Greninja and then 2 Glaring Moltres V. Pretty solid list overall. It's just proving that you can also use Barrel as well as Rev Room. You don't need to play one or the other necessarily, but out of all the lists I've seen so far, I think this is one of my favorites just because it's playing, 2 copies of Baby Glaring Moltres. They're respecting the fact that this is such a good card, so yeah, pretty solid deck overall. This next one's going to be a bit more of a wild card. Again, we're not playing any Baby Glaring Moltres. However, we are playing some pretty interesting basics, like 2 copies of Diancie with the ability Veil, which will essentially prevent your opponent from gusting up your benched basic Pokemon. So you kind of want to wait to evolve into Darkrai and just kind of attach a bunch of energies. You force your opponent to knock out a Diancie or 2, and then, you can hopefully be in a better position to respond with a KO. Also playing 1 Luxray, which is interesting, from Silver Tempest. You can start in the active position as a basic. Also has an attack that can do 50 damage for 1 Color Synergy and search your deck for any 2 trainers. Pretty interesting card overall. Not sure if it's worth the deck space, especially since it's just 1 basic out of, let's see how many basics we got. We've got 3 Darkrai, 2 Diancie, 2 Moltres, 1 Luminion, 1 Greninja. I would say it's a bit sketch just to throw a Luxray in there, to be honest. I'd rather have like a 4th Ultra Ball or something, but yeah. Interesting list regardless. Luminion V, obviously you can't find it with Nest Ball. You have to use Ultra Ball or Hisuian Heavy Ball if you prize it. But yeah, a bit sketch on this one. But yeah, certainly one of the more interesting lists for sure. So this next one is going to be a Darkrai Weezing deck. So a bit more on the rogue side. Definitely not as good as the main Darkrai builds. But we are trying to make use of the Toxic Factory Weezing that says each Dark Energy attached to Weezing provides 2 Dark Energy instead. So we use that in combination with a regular Weezing that does 20 damage and then 20 more for each Dark Energy attached to all of your Pokemon, I believe. So pretty solid Pokemon, but unfortunately you can only play a split of each of them. So although it seems nice that you can evolve both of them from Coughing, it's actually a bit detrimental because obviously if you only have 2 Coughing in play or you only have 1 Coughing, then you can only do one or the other, which is a bit unfortunate. So if your opponent targets down your Coughing pretty quickly, then you're going to struggle a bit because you only have 1 Glaring Moltres V and 1 of the Baby Glaring Moltres. So Weezing, interesting card overall. I did like mess around a bit with this Weezing. I think it's okay, but yeah, I don't think this is a particularly great variant of the deck, but certainly on the more casual fun side if you're a fan of this combo. So this next one's going to be our first Hisuian Samurott deck, focusing on Barrel, Hawlucha, Klefki, and Radiant Alakazam, which was really interesting to see. I know a lot of people don't actually like the new Hawlucha, but seeing 2 copies of it in this deck gives me hope that it's definitely not going to be as bad as people think it is. Place 1 damage counter on 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. The deck also plays 2 copies of Escape Rope, so you can just get out of annoying situations and essentially try and force your opponent to promote a Pokemon that's already been damaged, so you can take advantage with Hisuian Samurott. You can also use Radiant Alakazam as well to move around damage counters, which is really nice. Very cool list overall, I'd say. Support accounts make sense, the items make sense. There's stuff like 2 copies of Energy Search, 1 copy of Power Pad, 1 copy of Dark Patch. Makes me wish this deck had maybe 1 copy of Mew over 2 copies of Klefki, but this person obviously thinks if they just stick a Klefki in the active, it's going to help them out most of the time. What's also really nice is that when you play 2 Klefki, it means that if your opponent plays an Escape Rope, you can just promote the other Klefki and they won't get out of it. So against Losso, and that's obviously really gnarly and pretty fun to do. So yeah, seems like a pretty solid list overall. I do like Radiant Alakazam a lot. Definitely a cool list to try out. So this next one is going to be, again, a bit more of a spread build with the Hawlucha and Alakazam, but we are going back to playing Rev Room to make more synergy with Dark Patch. The previous build only played 1 Dark Patch, so kind of makes sense that they would lean into Rev Room if they're going to go heavy Dark Patch. So 3 Dark Patch, 3-2 line of Rev Room, makes sense to me. Also playing the 1 Moltres V and then the 1 Absol actually. So that Absol, I believe, is the one that does 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon, and then its second attack does 140 if they've already been damaged. So it's a smaller version of Hisuian Samurott, which is okay as a single prize option, but Overall, I'd say the Galarian Moltres, the baby one, would just be a better choice, but it's my 2 cents of it. I'm not sure I'm a fan of this deck compared to the one we just looked at. I think Klefki's a better choice, but yeah, doesn't seem terrible overall. Also approve of the collapsed stadium. Rocky Helmet as well actually is super interesting. Like, why Rocky Helmet? Because I'm trying to think of like where the math really matters for Rocky Helmet, because like if you do 110 and then the opponent hits you, they take another 20, so that's what, 130. So then you hit them for 220, so it doesn't really matter in that sense, but I suppose it does matter if they attack a Absol with it. Maybe it does matter then, but yeah, Rocky Helmet, pretty interesting one. Let me know if you think that's any value in there, but yeah, pretty cool list overall. This next one is going to be Hisuian Samurott Arceus deck. So if you're really finding this deck to be inconsistent, which fair enough, I found Samurott to be very inconsistent in testing. Being able to use Arceus is a major consistency buff, also allows you to accelerate energy from the deck directly. So even though this list is also playing 4 Dark Patch, being able to use Arceus to just power him up in one go is really helpful. So yeah, Samurott Arceus, pretty solid combo. Also playing 2 Absol, 2 Klefki, which is interesting. Like, you wouldn't think you need high counts of Absol or Klefki, considering you want your starter Pokemons to really be Arceus. But yeah, pretty interesting overall. I guess you could use Dark Patch to accelerate energy to Absol and use them in the late game, which is interesting. And 3 Howluchas, obviously an awful lot of them. You're probably using multiple a game, but yeah, super cool list to see. Also, 2 Rocky Helmet. What's going on with the Rocky Helmet? What do players see in it? Don't think it's the best tool card ever, but maybe if you want to run a copy of Arven or something to help you find that. But yeah, pretty interesting list overall. But yeah, thank you for watching. It's been Power. Let me know what you think about Samurott and Darkrai V-Star post rotation. Do you think they're going to be good enough? And yeah, thank you for watching.